This month, The Broken Brain is highlighting the Lavender Rights Project. Go to lavenderrightsproject.org to learn more about this wonderful nonprofit that helps Black trans individuals with community advocacy, increasing safety in the community, housing needs, legal needs, and many other things. You can get involved by going to their website. You can donate. You can look for volunteers if you are in a local area of where they might be headquartered in your area. Or, as always, it never costs anything to just share the website. If you are a paid member of the Patreon for The Broken Brain, you can go to patreon.com/brokenbrain if you're interested in that. And if you become a donor in this month, 50% of your donation will always go to the Lavender Rights Project for as long as you remain a donor. So once again, that's lavenderrightsproject.org. Check them out. Enjoy this episode.
The Broken Brain.
Recording in progress.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Broken Brain. It's Dwight here with you to talk about the intersection of psychology, culture, health, and, and sometimes I've noticed we've focused a lot the last few episodes on getting by, and not just getting by, but hopefully surviving to the point of thriving. And that's a therapist thing, guys. It rhymes, and so we can use it. It allows us to charge more per session if we can come up with rhymes. Surviving, thriving, right? Some of that's not true, but it is good to thrive and feel that. And we are going to talk about that today, thriving through obstacles and basically incorporating obstacles into our lives. I'm joined today by Jane Fischer, who is an educator, a teacher with a history of specializing with special needs, learning consultant, and also, Suzy's mom is a big part of this. Mm-hmm. She's the author of the new book, You Knew Suzy, Pushing Past the Boundaries of Never. And we're going to talk about what that means. Thank you for being here, Jane.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, let's get into this a little bit. Would you tell people about yourself and we're going to be talking about your story, which is told in the book, and let's let people know who you are.
Yes. So, right. I'm a mom of 3 children, and a proud grandma of 4, but my whole purpose was Suzy is my middle child. I have a daughter, Beth, who is 54, and Suzy is just 51, and my son Ben is 44. But my purpose for writing this book, it's been a mission of mine. Suzy was born with special needs, and I'll get into that a little bit more later on. But I felt very strongly that she'll never get married and she'll never have children, but I wanted her to be able to be known. Posthumously, I wanted her to live for many generations to come because she's such an incredible human being, and you'll hear about that. And it was very important to me to write her story, to keep her whole story alive. Unfortunately, with working, trying to raise 3 children, I never had the time. I mean, to write a book, you need a chunk of time to sit down and write. That was just not possible. Right around COVID, I retired. I worked 25 years as a teacher and, as you said, as a learning consultant on a child study team. And I started to write. My lifelong mission was to write a book about Suzy. It morphed into another whole project because while writing the book about Suzy, it also became apparent that it became a story that would help educate and be a very inspirational story for anyone facing any kind of challenges. And it really demonstrates the power of the human spirit. And what I've been told over and over again by many people who have written the book, it's helped them to face their challenges, to understand what it takes, the grit that it takes to never give up, and also to never accept your sentence in life. And Suzy did have a sentence. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that's who I am, and that was my mission and my goal in life.
I got from reading, even just kind of leading up until your experiences learning about Suzy's condition, and we're talking about Joubert. Did I say it right? Joubert Syndrome.
Yes.
which
Yeah, correct.
I was not familiar with, and we'll share what that is for people with that complexity. But leading up to that and throughout the book, I think you talk quite a bit about your personality of being like, I'm a problem solver. I like to see something, get it. You strike me as a person who's like, we're gonna do stuff in a way that is the right way to do stuff, which I think is a personality characteristic that can help to survive, that can help to thrive. Also, many people find it's also the flip side of that is like something out of your control goes wrong, and it's like that doesn't feel good, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and so what can tell people about what when you first learned about? I mean, it was right from the get go. This was an obvious condition right from birth, right?
Correct, correct. Just as an aside, if you knew me when I was very quiet, I grew up between two exceptionally bright brothers who were very accomplished, and I was, for the most part, an average. I never thought of myself as a particularly vocal person, but as I say, I had Susie. My daughter Beth was 2.5 years old. So I had a toddler at home, and Susie was born with numerous abnormalities. In and of itself, none of them would be a problem, when you combine them, it definitely indicated that she had a syndrome. Now, keep in mind, Dwight, that we went back, this is 51 years ago. So when we took her to the doctor in New York, a very prominent pediatric neurologist, he pretty much told us that she would never walk, she would never talk, she probably would not be able to learn very much. And at that time, he recommended that, he said, you have a 2.5-year-old that you'll focus on, you have a husband, it might be best to find a residential placement for her. Well, I was all of 24 years old. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that this was my baby, and I was going to start fighting for her. She was not going to a residential placement. Whatever she could do, we were going to find a way to reach that potential.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that the first thought that came into my mind was that any of those placements he's talking about would probably be staffed by people who believe all the things that he just said. Which
exactly right.
I feel like I hear that story more, and let me flip that to a more positive way to say this. I do hear that story less and less depending on the time frame of when kids are born. But man, you hear that story of just like, here's a blanket statement that your child will never, all these things that we don't know, and maybe we don't even study those that succeed in different ways. And there's a complexity to disability that I think people don't appreciate. They look at it as, we'd like to just kind of have a box we can put that expectation in, and also not to jump right into the discrimination piece, but it makes us feel better if we have a little place over here where we don't have to deal with things that make us feel uncomfortable, right?
Exactly right. And as you'll hear, and as you will read in the book, Susie is not an IQ score. She is not an MRI picture. She is not an individual that you could package and say, okay, so she's going to do this and she's not going to do that. She is a human being that has so much more than people realize when they label her. If your expectations are low, that's all the child will accomplish. But going back to that time, 51 years ago, now keep in mind, there was no Google. I couldn't go home and you start Googling,
Listen,
what do you do with the baby that it seems to have no sight, you don't think is ever going to learn, all the indication, there was so much brain dysfunction that you didn't think she would. Where do you begin? Well, back then there was an old-fashioned, people probably don't even know, the younger ones, there was called a telephone book.
Right. They still persisted in leaving it on your doorstep far after most of us stopped using it.
Exactly. But I began to make calls and look for centers and experts and professionals. Well, Now it's very commonplace, but back then there was only one center that had what they called an infant stimulation program.
Mm-hmm.
It was about an hour and a half from my house. I live in Livingston, New Jersey, and this was in Flemington Hospital, which is in Huntington County. It was about an hour and a half, and it was you had to be there by 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, keep in mind, I had a 2.5-year-old at home, so and the whole purpose of infant stimulation, which I am a very firm believer, and if I stress anything at all, it's to educate the parent. There's a lot of plasticity in the brain, and I truly believe this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to educate the parent how to stimulate the baby, the infant, the newborn, and to try um, to rekindle those circuits that are perhaps that are in place and try to help take over for those circuits that are damaged. And that's what we did with Suzy constantly. She was constantly being stimulated, constantly being bombarded. And I always say that her greatest therapist and teacher was her 2.5-year-old sister, who throughout the years incorporated her in all the play therapy. We played school, we played store, we played a dancing school, all kinds of music. And she was constantly surrounded by stimulation, and I honestly feel that while her body didn't allow her to do so many of the activities, she saw what she should be doing. And that made a very big difference in her life. And her sister continued to be throughout the years the individual who she tried to emulate always. And throughout the book, you will read Suzy is extraordinary in that she'll never surrender,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll never allow her to surrender. One of the first lessons she learned was, and that's why the book is called If You Knew Suzy, Pushing Past the Boundaries of Never, never say never. Never say I can't. We'll find a way. I know it's hard, but we'll find a way to make it happen. We might have to modify, we might have to accommodate, but we'll find a way to make it happen. And that's how she was raised. And throughout the book, and I'll, just very quickly just tell you that throughout the book, you will read how she faced every single challenge, and always with grace, with dignity, always had this remarkable way to not only make it happen for herself, but always reach out and try to help others while she was trying to help herself.
Yeah. One of the things that I hear a lot of from parents of especially significantly disabled children who have day-to-day boundaries and
Mhm.
things, especially when they're trying to individualize. And everybody
Mhm.
knows, anyone who listens to the show knows I'm a big fan of individualization whenever it comes to any form of treatment or any form of working with another human being. But one of the big struggles I hear people talk about is the idea of how much do I push and when, to say, let's push beyond what you've done so far, versus where's the level of I might need to accept that this one's not really working and it's only frustrating. And I don't want to push to the point of where I'm hurting, but also I don't want to not push and infantilize my kid to the point where I don't believe in them. What you guys had to really fight that battle and that
Yes.
balancing act, right?
Yes, yes. And I guess the best example I can give you of that is, and again, Suzy had an older sister who she emulated, and then of course she had a younger brother who, and this is a whole story unto itself. It was very hard. He was doing things that she couldn't do. And he was always very sensitive to that. And so he pretended that he couldn't do them because he felt so badly for her. And one of the classic examples that you just to demonstrate what you just said, Ben was riding a two-wheeler bike. Ben is 7 years younger than Suzy. And we worked with Suzy to ride a two-wheeler. It was Suzy is missing 3/4 of her cerebellum vermis, which is the part of the brain that controls motor movement. So it's instinctive. You have to know. You've tried, you've tried, you've tried. You don't give up, but you just learn to compensate. And there's a difference between giving up and learning how to try to make it happen, but happen differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so after many months of trying to work with her with the two-wheeler, we knew it just wasn't going to happen, and it became frustrating. So we went out and we found an adult tricycle. It's a three-wheeler bike,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, sometimes you have to, and it's a very fine line we walk, and it's a very delicate balance. But sometimes you have to just say, okay, I'm going to find a way to make it happen, but it's going to look a little different.
That's I think, acceptance and accommodation. But then,
Yes.
like you said, this was something was explained to me by a supervisor of mine years ago, talking just about therapy in general. We talk so much about balance with people, right? I maintain this balance.
Yes.
And here's this balance and that balance, and this is a range.
Right.
You tell your clients I've worked with, it's like they hear the word balance and range probably every session.
Yeah.
But the thing that he had passed on to me that I really appreciated, and I've thought of this concept all the time, which is that balance is not a perfect, like, having good balance doesn't mean that you find a healthy status quo and you stay there all the time. It has to do with like trying, and like a teeter-totter is meant to go up and down. And
Exactly.
yeah, if we're not having some kind of like struggle to find the balance, and if we're not kind of doing this, and for the audio only, I'm having my hands go up and down in disproportionate to each other. So asynchronous here. So when, but that's the way that balance works, is that we try a little and we go, okay, well, we tried a little, that's not working. Let's go to the other side. And well, maybe we went there too much. Let's try. There's a lot of experimenting as you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how Susie, to this day, it's still, every day, thank goodness, it's very difficult for Susie to do zippers and buttons, particularly buttons on jeans that, can be very tough. So, and she doesn't give up. She doesn't want, no, she wants to be like everybody else. She wants to, so you're always walking a very fine line. So fortunately, I mean, today elastic waist pants have become very commonplace. So and this is the kind of things that we said to her, look, why are you struggling like this? We'll go to the store and we'll find some pants with that. And so you're not giving up. You're just finding a different way.
Well, and it's a good principle for everybody to learn, because we all have those kinds of things that we might feel silly about, or I really struggle with this.
Yes.
And there was a story that went viral a couple of years ago of a person who was like having a depressive episode and saying, oh, wow, I've got dishes in the sink and the dishwasher's still clean and I haven't emptied it, and it was overwhelming. And somebody, I don't know if it was a therapist or somebody, said, well, why don't you just put the clean ones in, or the dirty ones in with the clean, and run it again? And they're like, well, is that okay? I was like, it's your dishwasher. You're an adult. Do whatever you want.
Yes.
Just that concept of freeing from that is good for everybody. And so anyway, as you say that, it's like a life skill. It's a good point of view.
Yeah, we've done it many times. You could use so many examples, even in learning. Reading is difficult for her. So again, what do? She wants to look like everyone else. So thank goodness today, especially, we have an Audible. So you have the books on tape. You have the book, but that ages me. But there are the books, on the computer.
My grandpa, when he lost his sight, used to do that thing where you'd get some libraries would have a program where they would either send you a tape of a book, and if it wasn't available, some of the publishers have for disability reasons, or they just have something. You'd submit a title and someone would read it, and you get audio tape, cassette tapes in the mail.
Yeah. Exactly. We've done that.
Yeah. And this is where also when people get into, I don't know, this as a reader, there's an annoying thing. People are like, well, is it really reading to do? And they don't think about the fact that some of this tech and some of these things allow access, right? For someone to be like,
absolutely,
I can read more and deeper stuff than it could without. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've had that issue with parents when I was working, and there were kids who were very severely dyslexic, and I would want them to get books, the Audible, and they would be very opposed because it's not really reading. And that you accommodate what works for your child. It is reading. And if you're that opposed to it, then you get the hardcover book and you read along. That's what we do with Susie a lot. We get the book and we have Audible reading with her,
Hmm.
So there's all kinds. You have to just be
Hmm.
creative.
One of the things I really enjoyed reading about was the things you learned as a caretaker, particularly the question of how much, like, how do you either let her go, kind of let her cook over there and not just come to the rescue, and also involving her in decision making and having her be an active part while at the same time understanding limitations and things and having to navigate that. I really like how you talked about that. I wonder if you could tell people a little bit about that journey.
That's probably the most difficult part of raising a child with a disability because, and for me, we were so connected, and you'll read this in the book, and I urge people to please, take the journey with us. As a mother, our primary job is to want to keep our children safe. That's for all children. But for disabled children, it becomes that much more complicated because you not only want to keep them safe, but you're not sure when to let them go. The other children, it kind of comes naturally. You take a deep breath and you pray. And with Susie, and you'll read this in the book, her first the first time was she saw her brother go to camp, she saw her sister go to camp, and she wanted to go. Susie is the most remarkable individual because she wants to be independent. She thrives to be her own person. And for me, how was I going to let Susie go? Susie and I were attached by the hip, and certainly attached by the heart.
Hmm.
But as you'll read in the book, and when I first sent her records to the camp director, and this is a perfect example how he packaged children. He said, "No, I don't think so. She's a little too low functioning. I don't think she'll be a candidate for this camp." And I had said to him, "You know what, Jim? Let me just fly up with her. If you meet her and you still feel this way, we'll go home and you don't ever have to, speak to us again." And we did that. And of course, he picked us up at the airport. And you have to know Susie, as limited as she is in so many ways, that's how charming she is. It's IQ versus EQ. And for all of those who don't understand, the IQ shows all her limitations, and there are many, but her EQ shows her emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
And she's exceptional in how she connects with people. And we did, and she first thing she did when she met him, she put her hand out there. "Hi, Jim. How are you? I'm Susie Fischer, and I can't wait to come to your camp." And everyone she met, she was so welcoming, and she told them how she couldn't wait to take part. And anyway, when he drove us back to the airport, he said to me, "Jane, I not only want her to come, but I am going to beseech you to never let anyone judge her
Hmm.
from reports and paper and pencil." He said, "Please," he said, "we want her." And she became a camper for the next 15 years and was so beloved and was one of his model campers. Going back to how I handled it, and this is why I bring this story up, how was I going to survive without her?
Hmm.
That she and my husband was actually a very big help. And he said to me, he kept saying, "It's not about you. You have to let her go." And I kept saying, "Yes, but who's gonna help her with this? And who's gonna help her with that? And who's gonna pick her clothes out? And who's gonna make sure she gets washed behind the ear? And, blah." And
Right, and it's one of those things where I think, as you'd mentioned a minute ago, with kids who have maybe a more typical development, you could say, if we want to use that
Yes,
term, you do worry about that, but you don't worry about it to the extent where you're like, I'm not going to allow them to go anywhere, right? It's just like
it's so true.
and also
Yeah,
they come back with dirt behind the ears sometimes, and it's like they survived, and it's like they wore the same clothes for a
absolutely.
week. That's not unusual to a disabled person.
No, it's not, but somehow I can't say
Or
we as
unique
mothers,
to,
but
I should
I
say.
as a
Sorry.
mother,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I kind of held her up to a different standard, or I held myself up to a different
Hmm.
standard,
Yeah.
and it was very, very hard. It's still hard. It's still hard. Susie's part of a supervised living program now, and when she calls me and tells me I'm going to the diner with Sarah, I said, "How are you getting there?" She says, "We're walking." And I said, "You're walking?" I said, "You have to cross South Orange Avenue." She says, "I'll be very careful, Mom." But you know,
Hmm.
it's Dwight. There are times when I look up and I say, "Please, dear God, watch her." And I know that for her to have any kind of life, I have to take a deep breath and pray a lot and
Hmm.
wait for the phone call when she gets home safely. But it's not fair to her. It's my problem. It's not
Hmm.
hers. You
That's
know.
such a big emphasis, I think. And I love that you bring that out in the stories that you're telling. It's very, and I was impressed by the vulnerability of that to be able to say, here's where you didn't just say, I learned this. Isn't that great? It was more like, here's
Yeah.
how I learned it. And I didn't like that I did that, or here's where I got burned, or here's where I felt I didn't do
Yes.
perfect. I feel like both with individuals with disabilities and their families, un, unfortunately, and I think this goes into a sort of a non-malicious discrimination, if you will. People mean well, but when they look
Yes.
and say, "Boy, the value of this individual is they inspire us," and it's like,
Yes.
and aren't you inspirational as a family? And I say that with a goofy voice because I know a lot of people that are like, "Yeah, we have a lot of bad days, and we're still valuable when we have bad days,
Yes.
right?"
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And Susie has proven that day after day after day. She's really been our teacher and our mentor. Um, I'm going in when she was 24 years old, and this is all in the story. She was diagnosed with end stage kidney failure. And after 24 years of her life battling her special needs and overcoming her challenges and being really torn down so many times only to be built up to keep fighting, we found out that she was very, very sick. And it turned out where the only thing that made sense is that I was going to give her my kidney. I was her mother. I gave her life. I was going to give her back her life. It's the only thing that made sense. Except when we went to be tested, Susie is type O blood type, and anything very quick lesson in transplantation. O can get from O blood type O. They can give to anyone, but they can
Hmm.
only get from blood type O. I turned out to be blood type A, so she could not get my kidney. My husband, of course, who was blood type O, had had 7 kidney stones. So she was in the wrong line. Wherever we
Hmm.
turned, she was in the wrong line. So we were going all over trying to find a kidney, and she was on dialysis. She was very, very sick. She was dying.
Yeah,
She was really
dialysis
dying.
is rough for anybody who doesn't know. Yeah.
If I could imagine hell, it would probably be a dialysis center. She was having such a terribly difficult time. But here's the story I want to tell you. She made it every time she walked into the dialysis center. Now, don't forget, most people on dialysis, she was 24. Most people on dialysis are much older,
Hmm.
and she had to be in a hospital setting because she had such a tough time with dialysis. And she would walk in and she would say, "Hi, Margie. How's your toe? Hi, John. Did your son get into college yet?" She's a real busybody, and she knew everybody's business, and she spread such sunshine in a hospital setting that was really very dark, and everybody came to love Susie. They kind of, she became the inspiration, for everybody else. And that's who Susie is. Even when we met and we finally did, after many years, we finally did. She did get a kidney that was donated to her by a cadaver, what they call a cadaver kidney. She was on a list. We got the call. There was a kidney waiting for her. And this is such a good story because it shows you how you can't give up on people. She was in the hospital. She was very, very sick. The surgeon came into the room. Now, he didn't look at Susie at all because, after all, Susie wasn't supposed to understand anything. And he was talking to me. It was a beautiful Sunday morning. It was in the spring. And I was asking a lot of questions. And he was getting very annoyed. It was obvious he was getting very annoyed. So he pivoted around, started to walk out. And I said, "Excuse me, doctor, I have another question. I'm not finished." So Susie said to him, to me, actually, she said to me, "Mom, let him go already. He's got children at home. He's got a wife. It's Sunday morning. Maybe he's got to play golf. Let him go." So he turns around, Dwight, and he looked at me and he said, "What planet does she come from?" And I said, "One that you and I will never know." Well, well, from that minute on, every time he walked into the hospital room, he kind of hit her on the knee with a chart. At that time, they used charts, and he said, "Hey, kid, how you doing?" And one of the nurses said to me, "God, we never knew he had teeth. He never smiled, but when he sees her, he lights up."
I like
And
that this is the story of a man who wakes up every day and says, "Now, what's the stereotype of my profession?" Let me see if I can reenact that. Anyway, but no,
exactly.
but it broke through that shell. Yeah.
Exactly, but she did that over and over again, and she did it with goodness. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't planned. It's just pure goodness. She doesn't know how to lie. There's no guile because that's higher level thinking.
Mm-hmm.
She's just pure and kind and sweet, and that's something that you can't teach. That comes from within.
I feel like there's been forward motion, and one of the things that has become, I'd say, I don't know, like not just normalized, but best practice, you could say, considered these days, is to have a strengths focused approach very much when you're coming to
Yes.
deal with things of everybody on whatever range of ability, but to say like, what are our strengths rather than starting with the limitations. And I'm curious about some of your thoughts about that societal shift. If you're seeing it, what do you think about it?
Exactly. And I see it over and over. I become very entrenched in the world of special education, as you can imagine. We've started many groups. We started PTA, Parents and Professionals for Exceptional Children. We started social groups. We started vocational groups. And I've seen what you've just described. Even educators, my peers, my colleagues, they come in and they tell me what the children can never do. They'll never be able to do that. Well, how do you know that? Did you even try to? We had a situation where one of I wanted to expose one of my students to a computer. This is years ago when computers were first becoming so popular, and she said, "Oh, she can't learn to use a keyboard." I said, "How do you know she can't learn to use a keyboard? Did you ever try to put her?" "No, but she has such fine motor difficulties." "Okay, that we know. She has fine motor difficulties, but what does that mean? That's why we're here to try to help her. Let's get the occupational therapist. Let's get the physical." And sure enough, this child not only learned to use the keyboard, but she became excellent in doing coding on the computer. Now, did we have to modify?
But you'd never know it if you didn't
Yes.
try. Yeah. Right.
Exactly, exactly. So my feeling is, and again, never, that's how Susie was raised, never say never. We can't begin with the she'll never do it. She can't do it. We have to give these kids a little more credit than that. They're not kids. Now I'm working with young adults, who want a life,
Yeah. And I wonder sometimes if there's a tendency to overestimate the risk of disappointment. And this is a parenting thing anyway. We all have to kind of
Yes.
accept that, but it really is amplified of like, hey, what if it didn't work out? Is that
Right.
still, and this goes back to my thought of, it's not only valuable when there's a win, right? In other words, and I would reinterpret, even say it's a win to try, because it's like, and then you
Right.
say, how do I cope? I'm learning to cope with the disappointment if it doesn't work out. And that is just as valuable as the story that ends with, and in this case, very, very, it's a good part where she's able to do that. And by the way, the first thought that came to my mind was, my brain doesn't do things like coding very well. I could learn that all day and I'm not going to
Right.
do very well. I know that about myself, right? So anyway,
Yes.
but say, what's the fear of like, oh, they're going to be bummed out. They're going to be disappointed, and let's not go there in case. Whereas like being disappointed
Yeah.
is a life skill.
Absolutely. And Susie, I don't want to portray this book or Susie's life, and I certainly don't do it. We share the hardships as well as the joys. She's had a lot of very painful time. Now, another Susie has always wanted to drive. This has been something to drive a car. And that is an impossibility for her. She has a very rare eye condition called congenital oculomotor apraxia, which doesn't enable her to focus. She'd be a danger to herself and a danger to other people.
And they probably wouldn't even give her a license with that condition, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So that was a very hard conversation. This is something that is not possible, and for all the reasons why. But it doesn't mean your life has to stop. It doesn't mean you can't go there. We're going to work. We're going to work. We're going to learn how to use buses. We're going to learn how to use trains. Now, I have to be honest. I still have not been able to put her on a train alone. I have to be very honest.
Buses and trains,
Yeah.
wonderful systems that also sometimes have some interesting interactions on them, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But I have been able to teach her how to use Uber,
Mm-hmm.
and or taxi cabs, And so while it's still it's still a very painful concept to her. She's some at the, but as you said, Dwight, my other two children too can't do everything. Sometimes they can't afford the house they want to buy. Yeah, and that's
Right.
very
And
disappointing.
you're more likely sometimes to say, well, they'll be all right. They'll deal with that
Right.
disappointment.
Yeah,
And yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
We don't say, I'm
You
going to
know,
try to stop you from purchasing land or a house or whatever,
right.
just so you don't get
Right.
disappointed. Um,
Right.
how, I wonder if you can talk about, I want to talk about advocacy a little bit, and the way that you approached that, as you see, as I like to put it, I think some of the most common like acts of either discrimination or shutting people's development down, I think most commonly it comes from people with good intentions. There are certainly people with
Yes.
bad intentions, but we don't run into them as much in the programs because they're the ones trying to shut down the programs.
Right.
We could go on about that, but but when you see people, just the need for advocacy, how did you as
Yes.
parents approach that?
Yes, yes, it's interesting because I've been on both sides of the table. I've been on advocacy as a parent, and I've been on as a professional. So, as a parent, I always tried. My personality is such. I don't come in with guns loaded. I don't believe you come in adversarial. Because anyone who is working in special education, you would hope really cares and really wants to do the right thing. Now, unfortunately, that's not always the case, but it's the hope. But
Right, but you come in kind of saying like, all right, let's start out as a team.
yes,
That makes
yes,
sense. That makes sense.
yeah,
It's like, because if I come in assuming we're not, then there's a good chance that we could have been, but we're not now. That
right.
makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely, and it's kind of like I've always thought of it climbing a ladder. I come in with where we all want to do what's best for Susie. Let's work together. We're a team. Blah blah blah. And a lot of the times that has been the case. Unfortunately, we have run into some cases where the child study team or the person, looks at me like, well, you're unreasonable or you're unrealistic. That's something I've heard over and over, which makes me crazy. You're unrealistic. she can't do that. You want us to put that in an IEP, an individual educational plan, when that's not a goal that's even possible. And then I'll say, well, how do you know? And I always try to keep my voice at a certain pace.
Right.
And then, and also I have to tell you, my husband and I have this thing. I'm the cowboy with the white hat on, and he becomes the cowboy with the black hat.
Yeah, division of labor in that case of like, you be this
Yeah.
guy, I'll be this guy.
Yeah, exactly. And he has listen, after you try and after you go through the steps and after you get to the top of the ladder and you're not going anyplace and these people are not doing the right thing for your child, then you have to say, you know what, I'm finished. We've tried, we've done, now I'm going to the next step. And the next step would be either the principal or the head of the department. And we have had to go that route. We have had to go that route, and that's part of being an advocate.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be afraid. This is your child, and
Mm-hmm.
we've had to fight for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do it all over again. And as I say, you don't start that way, but you might end that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my best advice.
Yeah. Do you find it's important probably to, as you put it, you get groups together, you get support together, and finding allies and trying to find, here's the person who is going to be my ally. Number one, like as you put it, don't be afraid to be able to go there if you have to go there, but to say, let me try to find allies, because if you don't look for them, you're not going to find them. And it's
absolutely
that community sense that comes through in what you're writing, the community that involves professionals, that involves other parents, that involves, yeah. I wonder if you'd tell people a little bit about the struggle of friendship that children face, children and young adults, and trying to make good, actual, safe friends, and the journey kind of that you went on watching her do that.
Yeah, this was a big part of the book, and probably one of the parenting parts that I regret the most. And I'm very open and honest in the book about this. Suzy she was out of district until she was about 7 years old, and all this is in the book, so I don't want to be redundant. But as I say, I became entrenched in the world of special education. I became a big advocate for inclusion, and I want to make it very clear: I'm not opposed to inclusion if it works. But I don't believe it should be a one-size-fits-all model either. And when Suzy was in middle school, she went through elementary school. She was in a self-contained classroom, and there were issues, but we were able to resolve them. And then she went into middle school, and any parent or any professional out there knows that middle school is a tough time for every child.
Right? Yeah.
And she was in a self-contained classroom there too, and a very astute psychologist who, her name is Linda Halpern. I owe her the world. She came to me one day and she said, I wish you could see how lonely she is. She doesn't have friends. And I said, Linda, she has friends. She has friends in the classroom. She said, yes, when she's in the classroom, she has a few friends. But once she walks out of that self-contained classroom, she is alone. She does not have anyone that she can reach out to. And she's really rejected by the mainstream. And I fought with her, and I kept saying to her, because I was president of this Parents and Professionals for Special Education, I kept saying, well, we have to do more than it's our job. We have to do sensitivity workshops. She needs a buddy, and blah, blah, blah. We have to make it work. So she said to me, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to shadow her one day. Don't let her see you. You shadow her and watch the way she walks.
This is a fascinating story. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, you have to get the book. You have to read it more because I can't go into everything.
Secret bits, guys. No, but yeah, go ahead. Give us the thumbnail.
So I did, and I watched her, and she went to the lunchroom, and she sat, and I'll never forget it. I get very choked up when I think about it. She sat in the middle of the of the bench, and there were girls on the right and girls on the left, and no one talked to her. No one they talked to her. There was one girl who we had arranged to be her buddy, because that was my idea. We just have a buddy. And she came over and she tapped her on the head and she said, "Hey, Suze, how you doing?" But this was an 11-year-old girl. She wanted to run with her friends, you know. And then I went out and I watched her in the school. They went outside. I watched her in the school ground. She was alone, and she tried to stand there and be so brave. She tried to stand there and, you know, kind of look around. She didn't want to cry. She was trying to really just take a deep breath and be so brave. And um, I'll never forget, I was standing behind a tree, and it was the end of the day. And I watched her with groups on the one side of her and groups on the other side of her. And she was like this. She was standing around, she was looking around, trying to look like she was busy, but really alone and really lonely. And I went up to her. She saw me and she, "Mom," and she ran to me, and I just hugged her and I said, "Susie, would you like to visit a school?" I had known of a school. It's called ECLC. It's a school for special needs children that goes from 5 through 21. I said, "How would you like to visit ECLC?" And she knew ECLC because she had gone there when she was a young girl. Anyway, we did go, and she had what they call an intake. And when I picked her up, Dwight, she ran to me and she said, "Mommy, please, please let me be here. I could be a cheerleader. I could be in the Key Club. I could run, I could play sports, you know." And she told me all the activities that she could never do. Even if they allowed her as a token person to be in the group, she wouldn't have been in the group. Do you know what I mean?
Right. It's like welcome for, and once again, that kind of brings up the thing I keep thinking about, and I thought about as Richard Rook, is the value. What's the value of an individual person? Do we value them for who they are? Do we value them for a role that we put them into? Right. And the chance for her to be able to be with people where she is there, you know, I can see where that would be huge.
Think about it. We all pick our people. We all pick our groups. I'm sure you pick your group of friends. I picked mine, the ones that I get along, you know. And why do we, I'm not opposed to inclusion, but why do we have to force our young people, our young special needs people with groups that we think they should be in, when in fact, they're really not included. At best, they're tolerated, you know.
Yeah, and
So
I think that does hit, and we had a little freezing moment. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah.
I was just saying one of the things I took from your book that I think is very valuable is what is the value of an individual. I know I keep mentioning this, but, you know, is it like, oh, you're valuable because I can pat you on the head and feel good about myself? I'm not trying to, you know, dump on that kid, but at the same time, you know, that's what she was taught of those. Oh, this is how I approach a special person who needs, you know, and like, I love how you said that. If you put someone, oh, we're going to put you in this group, you're not really in the group, but we're going to put it in. How much of that is to make, are we going to treat it like, oh, you're valuable because you make us feel better about ourselves, versus like gravitating to people who have things in common as well. So that makes a lot of sense when you talk about that kind of balance of how do we, you know, include, but also allow people to be in a place where it's like, oh, I have strengths that are going to be, that will show up here and be valued here for me, and not just because, oh, you can do a thing, you know? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Well, this is a very touching story. I'm noticing a lot of the people that I've been able to interview who I really enjoy this kind of sort of direct individual memoir style storytelling. I think connects with people because it both helps people to see the specific things you guys went through, but then also find that as you're talking about these principles that you can apply, that are like, oh, you're sharing a thing you learned, not just, oh, here's a book of bullet points that tells you to do stuff. And I really like that storytelling that you bring to it. I think it's going to be very valuable to readers out there.
Thank you.
I want to give everybody details of where they can best places, the preferential if there are any, to get the book, and if there's places that you'd have them follow if you're doing other things that you like to share. Before we jump into that, I wanted to ask you, as I always like to ask guests, if they have any ways of giving back to the community that they would recommend to people, or whether it's a nonprofit charity organization or anything else like that. What would you like to share with people?
Yes. Well, there's a wonderful organization called Jespy House, JESPY, Jespy.org. It's an agency that provides for young people from 18 through 70, or 18. It's a lifetime. There are different levels of care. It's actually, we are as parents, our biggest fear is what's going to happen next, and I know it's still one of my biggest fears. And Jespy provides the services for what happens next, so that's certainly an organization you could Google.
Adulthood is often not supported exactly with those who have severe disabilities. Yeah, it's like, well, we did what we did, and good luck. And it's trying to find those, especially helping people with an empowerment kind of model is sometimes there's a dearth of that out there. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And they certainly, it's a nonprofit. They certainly need all the help they can get.
Yeah. Well, where can people find the book? Is there a good or best place? And what kinds of things would you like to share with people to follow your work?
Yeah. Well, the book, okay, and I'll just tell, this is a book. I happen to have a copy. The book is on Amazon. It's on Amazon, and it's on Barnes and Noble websites. It's available in hard copy, in Kindle, in Audible. And I would so appreciate everyone. I think that it's a story that in one way or another you will be touched by. What we didn't talk about, I'll mention very, very quickly. Suzy has a very rare syndrome called Joubert's, which we did not know she had until about 10 years ago because it was just discovered. And it is the reason for all her developmental delays and all her medical issues, which we did not know, but it turns out she is the oldest in the world known to have Joubert's because it's such a new syndrome. I'm sure there are other people that have had it that are older than her, but they didn't know about it. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. You can be tested for it. Both parents have to have it. It's an autorecessive gene. But again, my mission is to help educate other people in one form or another. So all that is in the book, and it will explain every facet of our very complicated lives.
It hit me as you're saying that. That's another reason to not give up hope, is that you look at it and it's like 10, 20, 30 years from now, they're going to be saying like, oh, there's a bunch of people out there we didn't know had this similar thing, and they're doing much better than we thought. And maybe they're masked enough that we didn't know. And, and you find that out. And not only are there ongoing treatments and therapies, but there's also we've seen that with autism. We've seen that where it's like, oh, there's lots more diagnosis. And by the way, there's some individuals we never knew because they were on the spectrum. Absolutely. Because they're kicking ass, So, Jane, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And thank you for writing the book too.
Thank you. And if I can help anyone, I do have a website, Jane M as in Mary, Jane M Fischer at .com. So if I can help anyone, I'd be glad to.
Wonderful. And yes, and try. that everybody look for that. It's Fischer with a CH in it, right? And so
yes.
People will find that also in the show notes. That'll be there too. If anybody wants to look at the episode description, that'll be there also. So you don't crash your car trying to write it down. All right. People drive. Or, if you're doing the dishes, it's easier.
Please don't.
But those are what people are doing during podcasts. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to the Courtemp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Courtemp Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.